been 10 days since the President told us an energy action plan would be announced soon to get more power to the grid. While we wait, some interesting developments, as you've just heard. Today, the confirmation that the financials have been signed off on what will become one of the world's biggest solar and battery energy plants, due to be constructed in Kenhardt in the Northern Cape. It's a big partnership with Norwegian solar company SCATEC, and it's due to start feeding power to the grid in less than 18 months if all goes well. But also, as many households consider a solar panel or two of their own, concerns that Eskom is seeking to impose a 900 Rand levy on those who utilise the sun's power. Let's speak to energy analyst Chris Yelland. Chris, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, it's being seen as a tax on sunshine. It's a great headline. But talk to us about this. I mean, we couldn't resist. But talk to us about what this tariff structure is all about. Because I think a lot of people are feeling, goodness, there's no incentive to take solar if I'm going to get a 900 Rand a month tax for using solar. Is that actually what is being proposed?
No, not at all.
I'm battling to hear you, Chris. In fact, I cannot hear you at all.
I'm sorry to say that the media are getting it all wrong. They're getting the wrong end of the stick.
All right, we can hear. I've just heard you say the media are getting it all wrong. So please talk us calmly through this suggestion.
Yeah, so there is no levy of 900 and whatever rands per month on solar system. This is completely wrong, and as I say, the media have got the wrong end of the stick. And I've seen several articles, on media, saying this, but it's all wrong. It's not. There is planned to be what is called a fixed component in the tariff, and separating the fixed component of the tariff from the variable component. So there is an idea that is being proposed by Eskom to have a fixed capacity charge and a variable energy charge. And in principle, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it is a good approach. The fixed component, and this is where I need to correct some of these articles, is not targeting solar PV customers with a solar PV system. It would be applied whether you have a solar PV system or not. So I think the first thing to understand is that we must stop talking about this as a tax on the solar PV. It's not that at all. Nothing like that.
So let me just recap what you said. So there's going to be a fixed component. This is a suggestion anyway, variable energy component charge. So this fixed component, it isn't added only if you've got solar PV. Is it added to everyone?
Correct.
Even if they have not a single bit of renewable energy? Anyone will get this. Okay.
Even if you have no renewable energy, you would still pay this fixed cost. And by the way, there's nothing new about this. I live in Johannesburg and I'm supplied by City Power, and I pay a fixed fee per month on my bill of a couple of 100 Rand a month, fixed, whether I use any electricity or not.
What does it pay for?
And if you live in Cape Town, sorry?
What does it actually pay for then?
What does it pay for?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, just think about a business that produces widgets. Eskom is a business that produces electricity. But let's say you have a business that produces widgets. If you stop producing widgets for a couple of months, you are still going to have certain costs like salaries and rent and things like this that have got nothing to do with your production. They are fixed costs. So there's a certain monthly fixed cost on a factory. And then the variable costs are the costs of production of that widget. The variable costs are those costs that vary in proportion to the number of widgets you produce. So any kind of factory or environment that produces anything can split its costs into fixed overheads and variable production costs. And in the tariff structure, the tariff then is intended to recover those fixed costs and separately the variable costs. And that creates what we call a cost-reflective tariff. There are other ways of making tariffs, but if you want a cost-reflective tariff, you should separate these out into fixed and variable components. So when you have a grid connection to a house, there's a certain cost of providing the size of that grid connection. And that is your fixed cost. Every month, if you've got a 10 amp supply, 20 amp supply, 50 amp, 60, 80 amp supply, there's a certain rand value fixed, but dependent on the size of your, or the capacity of your connection. And then you have your variable cost, which is like the amount of energy that is flowing through that system, which could vary depending on if you're on holiday one month, you're going to use very little energy.
It's how much power you consume. It reminds me a little...
How much you actually consume.
So it reminds me a little of the telecom bills where they used to charge you a certain amount to rent the line every month, and then your actual bill. So talk to me about...
Exactly.
There, I've got it. What about someone who goes completely off-grid and doesn't need Eskom at all? They obviously wouldn't pay anything because they wouldn't even be getting a bill.
Then you don't pay anything. You don't have a grid connection because you're off-grid.
Right, okay.
So if you can supply all your own electricity needs, you don't need a grid. Go off-grid. Don't pay a cent for your grid connection. You don't need one.
Yeah. So in other words, if you're using the grid for even just some of your electricity, it makes sense. What you're saying is that you're paying for some of the infrastructure and that upkeep. Why is Eskom slicing and dicing it differently or wanting to?
Yeah. So look, there are many customers at the moment that don't have any grid connection whatsoever. They don't have, any grid fixed cost. They just have an energy cost. And there are others like me and like you who pay a fixed fee every month on your electricity bill. And in order to allocate costs fairly, they are talking about restructuring the tariff.
Right.
One thing they're planning to do away with is what they call inclined block tariffs. This is an energy tariff where if you use above a certain threshold, you start paying more per kilowatt hour. In other words, that's a way of cross-subsidizing small users. In other words, larger units cross-subsidize smaller users. They are proposing to do away with this inclined block tariff and replace it with a fixed cost and a variable cost.
All right.
It's a new tariff structure they are proposing.
I see. NERSA still has to approve it, is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This still has to go through a public participation process. Public have got to comment. NERSA will finally make a decision, and it's very unlikely that they will accept what Eskom proposes. They hardly ever do, and they very often get challenged in court for getting it wrong.
I want to ask you one final question about the SCATEC deal in the Northern Cape. It sounds fantastic. It sounds like exactly the sort of thing we need. Am I buying into the hype, or is this a really significant step forward today, Chris?
Look, it's an important part of the so-called risk mitigation IPP program, the RMIPPP. You may remember that the RMIPPP was supposed to procure 2,000 megawatts of capacity, and this project is 150 megawatts of that 2,000. So it's very far from the full risk mitigation IPP program. 2/3 of the risk mitigation IPP program would have come from the car powership projects, but those projects have, at least for the time being, been blocked.
Do you think that's a good thing, quickly? Do you think it's a good thing to block car powership?
I think it's a good thing, yes.
Right,
in fact, in my capacity as an outer energy advisor, outer has decided to take this matter on review in the courts to try and block it, because it's not in the interest of South Africa. It's not a good deal for South Africa. It's an irrational deal, actually. And so that is being challenged in court. But this is a small part of that 2,000 megawatts. In fact, it's 150 megawatts of that 2,000.
This Northern Cape deal.
So it's a useful additional capacity, but it's very far from what government had planned.
Right, so it's a small but significant step forward. Thank you so much, Chris Yellen, for telling us like it is, and someone you can trust, I think, because some things Outer and Chris Yellen are saying great ideas, others not such great ideas. Chris Yellen, thank you very much. That's energy analyst Chris Yellen there.